Hi Jason, my name is Sean and I was your tutor today. So to start, I just want to say I think you did a good job analyzing the text and finding things to talk about in your essay, and I think you did a really good job in organizing those things into their own paragraphs. The main thing is that as a reader, some of these ideas could be a little stronger if you expand on them, either by adding more explanation or more specific quotes or examples. They also, the main body paragraphs that you have don't really line up with what seems to be your thesis. So I'm going to get into that. Some other minor things came up too, like spelling and formatting, but this didn't really get in the way of me understanding what you're writing. So let me get into that. And to start, you'll see some colored areas here. Green is going to be the main points that I saw of you connecting to Bogart's argument. Blue is going to be your thesis and things that relate to your thesis. Gray is going to be the areas that can be expanded on or clarified a little more. Purple is going to be formatting, and yellow is going to be spellings. Okay, I'm going to start with the blue and the green. So here in your thesis, you say these seem to be the main points, and as a reader, this is what we'll expect you to get into. We expect you to have a paragraph about facts, figures, and emotions. You do mention emotions here, but since this is the intro, you don't need to provide a specific example. And something like this, you could probably flesh out in its own paragraph if you want to talk about emotions on its own. As I said, you mentioned facts. This first paragraph talks about medical facts, right? It can cause cancer. But then you relate that to emotions. So let me pull up a resource real quick. So here's a video on ethos, logos, and pathos. These are the rhetorical appeals, and in the prompt it mentions appeal to emotion, and that's going to be pathos. Logos is sort of using facts, figures, things like that to sort of build the argument, give some actual credit to the ideas, like have statistics and stuff. Ethos is going to be sort of with the author's like presence, his credibility, how he makes himself credible, and why the audience should believe him. And so with that, going back to your paper, in that way, medical facts acts as logos, right? These are actual facts, so they sort of are persuasive in their own right. You don't really need to connect them to emotions, even if they are sort of scary, like cancer, diabetes, all these things you list here. But they're good on their own. You don't need to connect them to emotions. So that's one idea. For sort of revising this, just focus on the facts. Moving down, you talk about how he gains the trust of his readers. This relates to ethos, right, his credibility. Similarly, in the next paragraph, right, he connects with his audience, so he's more relatable, so that sort of also goes with ethos. Another idea is it's more understandable for the public. With these, though, let me get into the gray areas. Right, so with emotions, like I said, you need to make this more specific to emotions. Sort of like I said, you might even be able to just make this idea appear its own paragraph. With these two sentences here, the quote is a little vague, and the sentence that follows is also sort of vague. It basically just says he has ideas, but the reader needs a little more than that. Sometimes you really have to spell it out for the reader. You can't expect them to know things on their own. And that sort of holds up with this sentence down here, right? He's a man who is ready and willing to solve the problems. That sort of makes it where we could trust him, right? He wants to do something, but we also don't really know who he is that we should trust him other than he has ideas. So that's sort of how you could flesh it out, is how is he trustworthy exactly, other than him having ideas and like a willingness to solve the problems. Going down a little bit further, here you talk about him making these things understandable for the public, which is really good, but what exactly is he trying to do? How does this help his argument, like making this understandable to the public? Is he trying to push them to make a change in their lives, like don't look at your phone before you go to bed, or is it just to inform them of this stuff and leave it for them to decide? And this sort of goes with the other paragraph, but in its own way. So making it understandable to the public shows that he wants to help them, and so that really helps make that connection, make him trustworthy. So those are some ways you could think about revising this and making the connections a little stronger here to support your argument. All right, and going back to the top to your thesis, again, you mentioned facts, figures, and emotions. Emotions really more connect to this idea. You don't really bring up figures here, and you do mention facts, but the best suggestion I think I could make is to just revise the thesis to reflect the ideas in your body paragraphs. And moving on from there, in your conclusion, you mentioned making the ideas accessible for people, which sort of goes with this idea. But with conclusions, it's often best to sort of recap your main ideas for the reader so they sort of leave with those ideas fresh in their mind. So consider expanding the conclusion just to elaborate a little bit more on your main points. All right, moving on to the yellow highlights. Again, these have to do with spelling. So the main thing here, pollution is misspelled. You basically just need an extra L in there. And each time you have pollution, it is misspelled. So just keep an eye out for that. Since this is the main topic of the paper, it's really important that you get the spelling correct. Another pattern of misspelling has to do with basically words with F. So like with themselves and leaf, wolf, life, those sorts of things, the F basically becomes a V. So it'd be themselves, just like this. And this happens a couple other times. So there's lifes, again, just lives. And somewhere in this paragraph is another example of that, so just keep an eye out. There are some other areas of misspellings too, so just use word spell check to catch those. Obviously, even though Bogart is underlined, you don't have to listen to that. You can ignore a word for that. Moving on to the purple, the formatting. So for each of your body paragraphs, it seems to be split. So you basically start a paragraph here with a quote, which usually you want to avoid starting and ending paragraphs with quotes. You sort of want to lead into that, and that's what the first shorter paragraphs seem to do. So consider just connecting those into one paragraph, so that way it sort of flows together. Right, and the other formatting thing just has to do with the page number. It seems that you pretty much just entered it yourself manually at the top of the line, at the top of the page, but it needs to go in the header up here. And so to do that, let me just show you. Alright, so all you really need to do is go to Insert and look for page number, and you want it at the top of the page on the right, and then you just open the header again and you want to type in your last name just like this, and that'll carry over for each of your pages. And this way you don't have to like hit enter and type in something again, so it's just a lot easier for that. And there are also some YouTube videos on this too. If you need a better visual, you might not have the same version of Word as me, so just use YouTube to find these things as well. So as I said in the beginning, overall you did a really good job in finding these ideas and organizing them in your paper. I know this was timed, so it's a little hard to like have a thesis that you actually stick to, right? Because most of the time, I know from experience, you're basically coming up with these things as you're writing. So and sometimes you don't have time to go back. And so that's another big suggestion I'd have, other than like adjusting the thesis and adding a bit more clarity, is in the future just try to save some time, even if you're timed, to revise. If you're timed and you have a ways to go in the writing, just try to revise either as you go or with like 10 minutes to spare, just so you can make sure that you're making sense, that you're making these connections really strong. But again, you have strong ideas, it's just fleshing them out a little bit more. There's also some misspelling and formatting, but that doesn't mean I didn't understand what you're talking about. They're just little minor things that a lot of teachers will pick out. So again, I think you did a good job. Just keep these ideas in mind. Watch the video over if you need to. Visit me in my office hours or email me or anything. Just get in contact with me if you have any questions, concerns, or comments about my feedback. Hopefully this has been helpful, and have a great day.